Hey everyone, welcome to Haunted Midnight. I upload true stories every week on my channel, so if you enjoy this video, check out my other videos. Before we begin, over 90% of you are not subscribed. It would be amazing if you guys can subscribe and support me, as I am still a small channel. Thank you for watching. I should have known something was off when she insisted on picking the restaurant. That's not weird on its own. I get it. Some people are picky, but she was weirdly specific. She even said she'd make the reservation herself. I thought, cool, she's decisive. Maybe she just really likes this place. We met on Hinge a couple of weeks before. Her profile was normal. Cute pictures, decent bio, nothing screamed scammer or fraudster. If anything, she seemed a little too normal, like she put just enough effort in to be appealing, but not so much that it looked fake. I swiped right, we matched, and conversation flowed easily. No weird questions about my job or money, just regular, flirty small talk. She told me her name was Ashley, blonde, mid-20s, had that effortless Instagram model look without being over the top. She said she worked in social media, which made sense given how polished her pictures were. I didn't dig too deep. She was hot, seemed fun, and I figured, why not? The night of the date, I got to the restaurant first. It was fancier than I expected. White tablecloths, waiters in suits, the whole deal. Not crazy expensive, but definitely more than I'd usually spend on a first date. I told myself she just had good taste. She arrived a little late, looking exactly like her pictures, which was a relief. We sat down, ordered drinks, and she was charming. Maybe a little too charming. The kind of effortless charm that felt rehearsed, like she'd done this before. But I ignored that thought because, well, I was having a good time. Then she started ordering. Expensive appetizers, a top-shelf cocktail, the priciest entree on the menu. Again, not a red flag by itself, but combined with the way she barely touched her food, it fell off. Like she wasn't really here for the meal or me. Halfway through dinner, she excused herself to the bathroom. A few minutes later, the waiter came over, looking awkward, and told me my card had been declined, which was impossible because I knew exactly how much was in my account. I pulled up my banking app under the table and saw a pending charge from this restaurant, except it was for way more than what we'd ordered. I felt my stomach drop. I told the waiter I'd handle it and asked him not to run the card again. I wanted to see how this played out. Ashley came back a minute later, all smiles, acting like nothing was wrong. I played along, watching her carefully now. Something was off, and I wasn't going to be the idiot who ignored it. I told her I had to step outside for a second, and walked right up to the host stand. I asked if they could check their system and tell me who made our reservation. The guy hesitated, but when I said my card got charged way more than expected, he agreed to look. There was no reservation under Ashley's name. Instead, it was booked under a completely different name, one that sounded vaguely familiar. I pulled out my phone, searched it, and my stomach sank when I saw it pop up in scam reports. I went back inside, trying to act normal. She was still sitting there, scrolling on her phone like nothing was wrong. I asked if she'd made the reservation. She nodded, smiling. I asked what name she put it under. She hesitated for a second, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Then she said her own name. That was all I needed to hear. I told her I knew she was lying. She didn't even try to deny it. She just laughed. Not in a nervous way, but like she found the whole thing amusing. Then she reached for her purse like she was getting ready to leave. I wasn't about to let her walk out with my card info, so I blocked her path. I kept my voice calm, told her I knew what she was doing, and that the restaurant was already aware. She just smiled again and shrugged like it was no big deal. Then she said something that chilled me. You should check your card again. I looked down at my phone, refreshed my banking app, and saw 3 new pending charges, none of them from the restaurant, all from places I'd never heard of. She must have taken a picture of my card earlier, probably when I wasn't looking. Maybe when I was distracted by the menu, or maybe when she dropped her napkin and leaned down near my side of the table. I immediately called my bank, put a hold on my card, and then turned back to her. But she was already walking out the door. I followed her outside, but by the time I got to the street, she had disappeared into a crowd. No Uber, no car pulling away, just gone. Like she knew exactly how to vanish when things went south. I reported it to the restaurant, then to my bank, and finally to the police, but they didn't seem too concerned. Fraud happens all the time. They took my statement, but I could tell they weren't expecting to catch her. I searched her name, but nothing real came up. Even her phone number was a dead end when I tried calling it later. She'd probably been using a burner. And that's when it hit me. Ashley wasn't her real name. She had probably done this to dozens of guys before me, maybe even that same night. She had a system, and it worked. Pick a nice restaurant, make the guy think he's in control, then swipe his card info when he isn't paying attention. I got lucky. I caught on before she could do more damage, but it messed with my head for a while. Made me second guess every date after that. Every time someone suggested a restaurant, I'd think about her, about how easily she played me. I stopped using Hinge for a while. I even thought about deleting all my dating apps. But the worst part wasn't the money or the hassle of canceling my card. It was knowing she was still out there, doing this to someone else. And this time, they might not be as lucky. I never thought I'd get used like this. I mean, I've heard all the horror stories about dating apps, scammers, catfish, the occasional weirdo, but I never expected to be roped into some single mom's free babysitting scheme. It still messes with my head when I think about it. How smooth she was, how easy it was for her to pull me in without me even realizing it. It started pretty normally. Her name was Megan, cute, mid-30s, single mom to 2 kids. She had that tired but still hot look, the kind where you can tell she doesn't get much sleep but somehow still makes it work. Her profile was pretty honest. She made it clear she had kids, wasn't looking for hookups, wanted someone who could handle her busy life. I respected that. At least she wasn't lying about her situation like some people do. I figured she was just upfront about what she wanted, and honestly, that was kind of refreshing. We started talking, and she was cool. Easygoing, funny, didn't seem bitter about her ex, which was a plus. She talked about her kids in a way that made her seem like a good mom, but not in an over-the-top way. It was just a part of her life, and she wasn't trying to hide it or make it my problem. At least, that's what I thought. The first date was normal. Coffee in the afternoon while her kids were with their dad. It wasn't anything special, but it was nice. She was more attractive in person, which was a relief, and she had this effortless way of making me feel comfortable. No awkward pauses, no weird vibes. She laughed at my jokes, touched my arm, just enough to let me know she was interested, but not so much that it felt forced. I left thinking, yeah, I'd like to see her again. The second date was when things started to shift. She invited me over to her place, said she'd cook, that it would be more relaxed. I wasn't expecting anything crazy, but when I got there, her kids were home. That caught me off guard. I didn't think we were at the meet the kids stage yet, but she acted like it was no big deal. They were young, like 6 and 4, running around full of energy. She apologized for the chaos, joked about how hard it was to find a sitter, and I just kind of went with it. Dinner was fine, but I felt like an extra in someone else's life. The kids were climbing on her, interrupting every conversation, and she kept looking at me like she was gauging how I was handling it. I didn't want to be rude, so I played along. I asked them about their favorite cartoons, helped the little one open his juice box when he struggled. It was fine, but definitely not what I expected for a second date. Then she disappeared. Not left the house disappeared, but she kept finding excuses to step away. First, it was to take a call in the other room. Then it was to quickly fold some laundry. Then she was in the kitchen for way too long, leaving me with the kids. At first, I thought she was just testing me, seeing how I handled being around them. But after about 20 minutes alone with them, it clicked. She wasn't just testing me. She was leaving me with them on purpose. I didn't say anything that night because I figured maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe she really did just need help for a few minutes. I liked her, and I didn't want to overthink it. But then it happened again. She invited me over again a few days later, same setup. Said she put the kids to bed early so we could have time alone. I showed up, and of course, they were still awake, bouncing off the walls. She forgot to feed them, so she asked if I could watch them while she threw something together in the kitchen. Then, somehow, I ended up giving them baths. Then she was too exhausted to get them to sleep, so I found myself reading bedtime stories while she scrolled on her phone. By the time they were finally down, she was suddenly too tired to hang out, and the night was basically over. I started seeing the pattern. She wasn't dating me. She was auditioning me, seeing if I could step into a father figure role, or at very least, a free babysitter position. It got worse. The next time I came over, she was already dressed up. Hair done, heels on, purse in hand. She laughed when she saw my confused face and said she forgot to mention she had a last-minute errand to run. She promised it wouldn't take long. Just an hour, maybe 2. I was dumb enough to believe her. 3 hours later, I was sitting on her couch with a sleeping 4-year-old on my lap. Her 6-year-old passed out on the floor, and no idea where she was. She wasn't answering her phone. I felt trapped. I couldn't just leave the kids alone, and I had no way of knowing when she'd be back. When she finally came home, she was drunk. Hair messy, lipstick smudged, giggling like she'd had the best night of her life. She barely acknowledged me, just thanked me for watching them, and went straight to her room. That was it for me. I left and I didn't come back. She texted me the next day like nothing happened. Said the kids loved me, that I had a natural way with them. She didn't even apologize for ditching me. Just acted like it was normal. Like I should have expected it. I ignored her. Then the messages started coming. At first, they were casual check-ins. Then they turned into guilt trips. She told me how hard it was being a single mom, how she thought I was different, how she needed someone who understood. When I still didn't respond, she started getting nasty. Called me selfish and mature, said I clearly wasn't man enough to handle real responsibility. I blocked her. That should have been the end of it. But a few weeks later, a mutual friend told me she was already seeing someone new. Some guy she met on Hinge. And guess what? He was babysitting too. I knew something was off the second I hugged her. It hit me like a wall. Not oh bad, not oh, she must have had a long day bad. I mean deep, embedded, years of neglect bad. Like something had crawled inside her hoodie, died, and had been decaying for a while. It wasn't just body odor. It was something worse, something unnatural. I wish I could say I made an excuse and got out of there immediately, but I didn't. I tried to push through, told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a weird one-time thing. I had met her on Hinge a few weeks earlier, and she seemed normal enough. A little quirky, maybe, but not in a bad way. Her pictures were cute, and she was funny. She had this dry sense of humor I liked, and she didn't seem like the type to play games. She said she was into art, indie movies, and hiking. Nothing that would set off alarm bells. She didn't look unclean in her photos either. If anything, she had that effortlessly cool, slightly alternative vibe that usually comes with an obsessive skincare routine. But standing in front of her in real life, I was hit with a smell so strong it made my eyes water. There was no way she didn't notice, no way she wasn't aware of it. And that's what made it worse. She acted completely normal, like she didn't smell like a dumpster behind a fish market in July. I forced myself to breathe through my mouth and kept the conversation going. Maybe she was just having a rough day. Maybe I was being shallow. I didn't want to be the guy who bailed just because someone had a little BO. But it wasn't just BO. It was layered. There was sweat, sure, but under that was something more sour, something almost rotten. And then there was an earthy, almost moldy scent, like damp clothes left in a washing machine for too long. We had plenty of coffee, so I figured I could at least make it through that. We walked to the cafe, and every step next to her made it worse. The air shifted around us, and every few seconds, I'd get another wave of something putrid. I tried to pinpoint what it was, but it was like my brain refused to process it. I started wondering if maybe it was her clothes and not her. Maybe she had a weird laundry situation going on. Maybe she had been around someone else who stank, and it rubbed off on her. But when we sat down, it became obvious. It was her, every inch of her. She leaned in when she talked, and the smell got stronger. It was in her breath, her hair, her skin. My stomach turned. I tried to sip my coffee to distract myself, but it was useless. The worst part was that she was attractive. Objectively. If you looked at her without a functioning nose, She was actually really pretty, but the smell made it impossible to focus on anything else. Then I noticed something else, her nails. They were long, too long, and underneath them was something dark. Dirt? Food? Something worse? I didn't want to know. Her hands moved when she talked, and every time I caught a glimpse, my stomach tightened. How did she not notice? How did she function like this? I started planning my exit. I wasn't going to be a jerk about it, but I knew I wasn't making it to the end of this date. I told her I had something early the next morning and would have to head out soon. She seemed disappointed but didn't argue. Then she touched me. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine for just a second, but it was enough. Her skin was clammy, and the smell intensified. I pulled back instinctively, trying to play it off like I was adjusting in my seat, but I saw the look on her face. She knew. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I'd go home, shower the imaginary filth off me, and never see her again. But then she texted me that night. She said she had a great time, said she really liked me, said she wanted to see me again. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to process. I wasn't even sure how to turn her down without being cruel. But then she sent another message. She asked if I had noticed the smell. I stared at my screen, confused. She followed up before I could even think of a response. She said it was a medical condition, that doctors couldn't figure it out, that she tried everything, special soaps, diets, antibiotics. Nothing worked. She said she had stopped dating for a while because of it, that people always ghosted her or made excuses. I felt guilty, but I also felt sick, because it wasn't just a little problem. It was overwhelming. And if she knew it was that bad, why did she act like nothing was wrong when we met? Why didn't she at least bring it up before we saw each other in person? I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. She sent one last message a few hours later. She said she understood. I blocked her. I should have trusted my gut when she hesitated before answering if she was really single. It wasn't a huge pause, just a small flicker of hesitation before she said yes, but I caught it. I remember thinking it was weird, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just bad at answering questions on the spot. Maybe she had an ex who lingered in her mind but wasn't actually in the picture anymore. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Her name was Sarah, and we matched on Hinge after a few days of back and forth swiping. She was gorgeous in a way that felt effortless, like she didn't even try but somehow always looked good. She had this sharp humor that made texting fun, not just the usual boring small talk. We talked about movies, bad dating stories, and how she was new to the city and still getting used to things. It felt easy. We decided to meet up for drinks, nothing fancy, just a casual bar downtown. She picked the spot, said it was a place she'd been meaning to try. I got there a little early, grabbed a table, and waited. When she walked in, she was even prettier in person, but there was something in the way she scanned the room that I noticed right away. She wasn't just looking for me. She was checking for something, maybe someone. She hugged me, sat down, and we started talking. At first, everything felt normal. She laughed at my dumb jokes, sipped her drink, and leaned in like she was actually interested. But every few minutes, she would glance over my shoulder toward the entrance. It wasn't casual either. It was quick, sharp, a habit, like she was expecting something bad to happen. At one point, I asked if she was okay, and she brushed it off, said she just had a lot on her mind. I didn't push. I figured maybe she was just nervous or had a bad day. I tried to lighten the mood, kept the conversation going, and for a little while it worked. She relaxed. She smiled more. She stopped checking the door so much. Then I saw him. I didn't know who he was at first. Just some guy who walked in alone, looking around like he was searching for someone. But then I saw her reaction. She went stiff. Her face dropped. It wasn't subtle. It was like all the life drained out of her in an instant. I turned, trying to be casual about it, and saw him staring right at her. He was tall, kind of built, with this angry energy that made my stomach tighten immediately. He wasn't looking around anymore. He was locked on her, and he wasn't smiling. I asked if she knew him. She didn't answer right away. She looked down, fidgeted with her glass, then mumbled something about her ex. That was all I needed to hear. I asked if she wanted to leave, but before she could respond, he was already walking over. I've been in some tense situations before, but this was different. He didn't start yelling. He didn't cause a scene. That would have been easier, honestly. Instead, he pulled up a chair, sat down like he belonged there, and stared at me. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. I tried to stay calm. I wasn't about to start something in the middle of a crowded bar. But I also wasn't going to sit there and let this guy intimidate me. He ignored me completely, didn't even acknowledge I was there. He just looked at her and asked if she was really doing this. She didn't answer. The whole vibe of the bar had changed. The people at the table next to us were trying not to look, but I could tell they were listening. Even the bartender glanced over a few times, probably trying to figure out if things were about to escalate. Then he leaned in and said something to her in a low voice. I didn't hear all of it, but I caught enough to know it wasn't good. She started shaking. Not crying, not making a scene, just shaking. That's when I knew this wasn't just some clingy ex who had moved on. This was something worse. I stood up, told her we should go. She hesitated, looking between me and him like she was stuck, like she didn't know which choice was going to end worse for her. He stood up too. At this point, my heart was pounding, but I wasn't about to back down. I wasn't trying to fight the guy, but I wasn't going to let him intimidate her either. I told him she didn't want to talk to him and that he should leave. He just stared at me, his jaw clenched, like he was deciding if I was worth the trouble. Then he smiled, not a real smile, the kind that makes your stomach turn. He told her he'd see her later, not goodbye, not take care, just that, like it was a promise. Then he walked out. She didn't move for a second. She just sat there, staring at the table, breathing heavy like she'd just run a marathon. I asked if she was okay. She nodded but didn't look at me. I told her we should get out of there, and this time she agreed. We walked out together, but she was distracted, glancing over her shoulder, checking the street. I asked if she needed a ride home, but she said no. She said she'd be fine. I didn't believe her. I told her to text me when she got home safe. She promised she would. She never did. The next day, I checked Hinge, and her profile was gone. Disappeared, like she never existed. I tried texting her, but the messages never went through. Either she blocked me or she changed her number. To this day, I have no idea what happened to her, and I don't think I want to know. I should have trusted my instincts when I pulled up to her place, and something just felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a weird gut feeling. That little twinge of discomfort that comes when your brain picks up on something before you fully realize it. Her name was Olivia. We matched on Hinge a couple of weeks before, and she seemed normal enough. Cute, into fitness, had that girl next door vibe. She mentioned she had a dog in her profile, a pit bull named Zeus. I like dogs, so I didn't think much of it. If anything, it was a plus. We had talked about meeting up for drinks or getting dinner, but she suggested just hanging out at her place instead. Said she had a long day and didn't feel like going out, but she still wanted to see me. Normally, I'd be a little hesitant about that, but she had been pretty open in our conversations, and I didn't get any weird vibes from her, so I agreed. Her apartment was in an older complex, the kind with faded beige walls and a parking lot full of cracked pavement. I pulled in, parked, and sent her a quick message to let her know I was outside. She replied almost instantly, told me to just come in. The door was unlocked. That should have been another red flag, but I figured maybe she had just forgotten to lock it. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not necessarily bad, but thick, like the air was heavy. That stale dog smell mixed with something else I couldn't quite place. It was dimly lit, just a lamp in the corner, and there was clutter everywhere. Shoes piled near the door, laundry stacked on a chair, some plates on the counter that hadn't been washed. It wasn't disgusting, but it definitely felt off. Then I heard a low growl. I turned my head, and there he was, Zeus. He was massive. I like dogs, but this wasn't some friendly, tail-wagging welcome. He was stiff, staring at me with dark, unblinking eyes, standing completely still except for the slight twitch in his back leg. His ears were pinned back, lips slightly curled, like he was deciding whether I was a threat or just something to chase. I asked where Olivia was, trying to keep my voice calm. No answer. Just Zeus still staring at me like he was waiting for a reason. I threw a small step forward, and that's when he lunged. I barely had time to react before I felt his weight slam into me. It was like getting tackled by a linebacker. My back hit the floor hard, and suddenly, his teeth were snapping inches from my face. I threw up my arm, and that's what saved me. His jaws clamped down on my forearm instead of my neck. The pain was instant, a deep, crushing pressure. I tried to shove him off, but he was too strong. His eyes were wild, locked onto me like I wasn't even a person, just prey. I could feel the warmth of his breath, hear the wet, snarling sounds as he adjusted his grip. His claws dug into my chest as he pushed down harder. Then I heard Olivia's voice. I don't know where she had been, but suddenly she was there, screaming at Zeus, trying to pull him off. He didn't let go immediately. It took a few seconds, a few harsh yanks on his collar before he finally released my arm. I scrambled back, pressing against the wall, clutching my bleeding forearm as she shoved him into another room and slammed the door. She turned to me, eyes wide, hands shaking. She looked horrified but also nervous, like she knew this was bad, but maybe not bad enough. I couldn't even process what she was saying at first. My heart was still hammering, adrenaline making my whole body shake. I looked down at my arm, at the deep indentations in my skin, the punctures, the blood already soaking into my sleeve. She kept apologizing, but the way she said it didn't feel right. It wasn't panic. It wasn't real concern. It was more like damage control. I told her I needed to go. She nodded, kept saying she was sorry, kept insisting that Zeus had never done that before, that he was usually so sweet, that maybe I had startled him. I didn't say anything. I just walked out. By the time I got to my car, the pain was fully setting in. It wasn't just a surface wound. My arm felt like it had been put in a vice grip. I could still feel the shape of his teeth, the crushing force of his bite. My fingers were tingling, and I was starting to worry about nerve damage. I sat in my car for a few minutes, just trying to breathe. My brain was still catching up to what had just happened. I wasn't even sure if I should go to the hospital or just try to clean it up myself. Then my phone buzzed. It was Olivia. She was still apologizing, still saying she didn't know what had gotten into Zeus. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told me this had happened before. Not exactly like this, but close. She said he had bitten an ex before, but it wasn't a big deal. That it wasn't his fault. That the guy had acted weird, and Zeus had reacted. That's when I realized something. She knew. She had invited me over, knowing full well what Zeus was capable of. And she hadn't warned me. I didn't respond. I blocked her number, went to the ER, got my arm checked out. No nerve damage, but deep punctures, a bad infection risk. I had to get a tetanus shot, antibiotics, the whole deal. For days I kept replaying it in my head. How close his teeth had been to my face, how strong he was, how easily it could have gone worse. And the worst part? I don't think she really cared. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out the video on screen.